You ever hear about a place so creepy people swear it eats the ones who step inside? That's Traverse City State Hospital. Locals call it the old asylum. Most folks won't go near it, not even during the day. My editor thought it'd make a good story. Write a fun travel piece, he told me. But then he leaned closer and dropped the real reason. People had been dying near the hospital. A hiker found on the trail with blood all over his hands, but no wounds. A scavenger crushed under a stairwell, his body twisted like he'd been shoved there. A runaway kid who vanished, then came back 2 weeks later unable to talk. The police wrote it all off as accidents. But the locals? They called it a warning. That's when the folder landed on my desk. Thin, but heavy in a way paper shouldn't be. Inside were police notes, vague coroner reports, and a rumor that the basement floods even when the weather's dry. My editor just said, write what you can prove, but go. So I packed my usual kit: notebook, recorder, camera. No weapon, no partner. Just me. By midnight, I was boarding a train out of Chicago, heading north. I tried to tell myself it was simple. Snap a few photos of the ruins, get some quotes from townspeople, write it up, and be back by Monday. But the way the fishermen in the harbor bar looked at me before I left, it stuck. One of them muttered, "Don't go under. Don't ever go under." He didn't have to explain what he meant. Everyone knows the asylum has basements. On the train, the city lights slid away and the darkness took over. I stared at the folder in my lap, fighting the urge to open it again. I already knew what was inside, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that the more I read, the more dangerous this assignment became. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes I saw a staircase that didn't end. Just kept going down and down. My recorder was in my hand when I woke from one of those half-dreams. I clicked it on and said into the mic, "Traverse City State Hospital. Story start." My voice sounded smaller than I expected. The train shook as it cut through the night, heading into the North Woods. I thought about the plan. First, I'd hit the public library, maybe the historical society. Talk to locals. Then I'd walk up to the fence and get a look for myself. If there was a gate, I'd find it. If there was a lock, I'd see if anyone had the key. I told myself I'd only go as far as the first floor, just far enough to prove the place was nothing but broken windows and old bricks. But deep down, I already knew that wasn't true. By the time the conductor announced Traverse City, the sky was still black. My reflection in the train window looked pale, tired. Behind me, it almost seemed like there was someone else sitting in the seat, watching. I blinked, and the glass was empty again. I grabbed my bag and stood. My heart was pounding like I was about to walk into an interview with death itself. That's how it started. That line kept looping in my head as I stepped off the train. Cold air bit my face. The station was small and quiet. I told myself to relax. This was a job, not a dare. Get the facts, get the photos, go home. I walked to a diner near the station and ordered eggs and coffee. The waitress saw my press badge and nodded at my bag. "You here for the old hospital?" she asked. I said yes. She didn't smile. "Don't go alone." I gave the safe answer. "I won't." We both knew I would. I kept pushing the fear down with tasks. First stop, the public library. I asked for old maps and building plans. The librarian was helpful until I mentioned the basements. Then she closed a folder and said, "Those areas aren't open to the public." I thanked her and wrote down everything I could. Dates, renovations, tunnels for steam and supplies. A note about a special wing missing from some floor plans. Probably nothing. Outside, wind scraped the parking lot. I called the local police spokesman. He confirmed the recent incidents, but wouldn't call them connected. "There's no threat to the public," he said. That line usually means, "Please stop calling." I thanked him anyway. At the harbor, I found the fishermen. They were fixing nets and pretending not to stare. I told them my name, my paper, and that I'd visit before sunset. One man wiped his hands on a towel and said, "You can take your pictures from the road." Another said, "If you hear anything below you, leave. Don't look. Just go." I wanted to laugh to drop the tension, but it didn't feel right. I said I'd be very careful. By afternoon, I had the basics: dates, patient counts, the old rule that beauty and routine were part of treatment, gardens, music, fresh air, then the treatments no one wants to list. I didn't write those down. I knew them already. My plan stayed simple. Cheap motel, visit in daylight, no hero moves. I told myself the same line again and again. I'm not here to chase ghost stories. I'm here to report. At the motel desk, The clerk slid me a key without looking up. "Don't leave your window open," he said. I asked why. "Kids," he said, and stopped there. I didn't ask any follow-ups. In my room, I spread the notes on the bed and stared at the map. The basements weren't marked clearly. Sections were missing like someone had cut them out. Who cut them, and why, stayed off record. I picked up the recorder. "Day 1, I said. "No proof of anything. Locals are nervous. Police say it's fine." Hearing the words helped me believe them. It got dark fast. A sound came from the room above me. A chair sliding. Then a walk, heel to toe. I told myself it was nothing. I turned up the TV and let the noise fill the room. I slept in bursts. Every time I woke, I told the same lie. I'm not going down there. I told myself I'd wait for daylight. Get a safe look, take a few photos, maybe even call it quits. That was the plan. But plans don't mean much when curiosity starts to itch. By the time the sun went down, I was already walking toward the hospital. The road leading there was quiet, lined with bare trees that clawed at the wind. My boots crunched on gravel. Ahead of me, the asylum rose out of the dark like a black mountain. The windows were shattered, jagged like broken teeth. Whole sections of the roof sagged, and vines crawled over the walls. The place looked less like a building and more like a body left to rot. The gates were chained, but the chain had been cut before. A warning, or maybe an invitation. I didn't think about it for too long. I slipped through the opening, my breath clouding in the air. The courtyard was wide, littered with trash and rusted scraps of old furniture. I expected silence, but the wind made the building moan, like it was breathing. The sound followed me, rising and falling, like a sigh that never ended. Every step felt louder than it should have. I aimed my flashlight toward the main entrance, but the doors were locked tight, boards nailed across. To the left, a smaller service door hung loose on its hinges. It led down a short stairwell that disappeared into the ground. Basement access. Of course. I told myself I'd just peek inside. Prove to myself it was nothing. I grabbed the door handle. Cold metal. It screeched when I pulled, echoing through the halls below. Dust spilled down, and the smell hit me. Mildew, rust, something sour beneath it all. The flashlight beam cut through the dark. Cement walls. Pipes overhead. A long hallway stretching further than I could see. My throat felt tight. My fingers wanted to let go of the light, but I forced them to stay steady. I hesitated. My brain threw up excuses. The floor might collapse. The air might be unsafe. No one knows you're here. All of it was true, but another thought drowned those out. If I turned back now, I'd never be able to write the story. And worse, I'd never forgive myself for walking away. So I stepped inside. The door shut behind me with a heavy slam. I froze. Listened. Nothing. Just my own breath bouncing off the walls. I swallowed and lifted the light. The hallway split left and right. Old paint peeled in strips. A broken wheelchair sat sideways against the wall, one wheel still spinning, though I hadn't touched it. I felt a pressure in the air, like the weight of the hospital was pushing down. The silence didn't feel empty, it felt crowded. For the first time I admitted it, this wasn't just an assignment anymore. I'd crossed into something else. Something alive in a way that made my skin crawl. The safe world was gone. I knew at the moment my next step carried me deeper underground. And there was no turning back. The deeper I went, the worse it felt. The air was heavy, thick with damp and dust. My flashlight caught flakes of paint drifting down like snow. Every sound echoed too long, stretching until it didn't sound like me anymore. The air wasn't just stale. It felt watched, like every breath I took had an audience I couldn't see. At first, it was small things. My beam passed over a doorway, and for a split second I thought I saw someone standing inside. Just a shape, tall and still. When I swung the light back, the room was empty. My brain jumped in to save me. Tricks of the shadows, fatigue, bad angles. Logical. Safe. That word, safe, already felt like a lie. Then I stepped into an old office. Broken cabinets, papers everywhere. I crouched to take a closer look. Patient files, yellow and curling at the edges. I flipped through them. Names, diagnoses, treatment notes. Then I froze. One page wasn't old. It was clean. White. Fresh ink. My name typed at the top. My birthday, my home address, everything correct. My stomach dropped. I felt my hands shake. I dropped the folder, papers spilling across the floor like birds scattering. Before I could process it, a sound creaked down the hall. Slow. Rhythmic. I swung the light. A wheelchair rolled into view, one while squealing. No one pushed it. It just kept moving, dragging itself until it stopped right in the center of the hallway. I stared, gripping the flashlight so hard my knuckles hurt. Old building, I whispered out loud. Air currents. Gravity. My voice bounced back at me, weak. The excuse sounded pathetic even to me. I backed away, but then another sound joined in. Papers shifting, though I hadn't touched them. I turned, and the patient files I'd scattered were sliding across the floor, one by one, like invisible hands were flipping through them. Pages lifted, turned, dropped. My name flashed again before the pile snapped shut with a loud clap. I wanted to run. Every nerve screamed at me to leave. But my legs didn't move. My job was to dig, and I couldn't stop. Some part of me needed to know what else the building was hiding, even if it killed me. I raised my recorder and clicked it on. My voice cracked. Hallway, basement level. Strange activity. Possible draft. My words trailed off because I didn't believe them. I sounded like a kid trying to convince himself there's no monster under the bed. The silence that followed felt staged, like the building was waiting for me to speak again. When I didn't, the wheelchair groaned once more, then stopped. I held my breath, so long my chest hurt. I told myself to keep moving. Not because I was brave, but because standing still was worse. I picked a hallway and walked, the light shaking across the walls. My shoes crunched on glass, and somewhere behind me, something soft shuffled, matching my pace for 3 steps before fading out. Every step made it clearer. Logic wasn't welcome here. The hospital was testing me, peeling away my certainty, daring me to admit that facts weren't enough anymore. And deep down, I knew I'd already failed that test. The hallway ended at a rusted metal door. It looked heavier than anything else I had seen so far, like someone wanted to keep whatever was behind it locked away. I hesitated, then pulled. The hinges shrieked as if they hadn't moved in decades. Cold air rushed out, damp and sour, wrapping around me like a wet sheet. The flashlight beam hit stone steps leading down. I shouldn't have gone further, but I did. Each step echoed like a hammer. The deeper I went, the colder it became, until I could see my breath drifting in front of me. My heartbeat echoed louder than my footsteps. The stairs opened into a tunnel. Long, narrow, and endless. The ceiling was low, pipes dripping water that splashed onto the floor in steady beats. The smell was worse here, mold mixed with something sharp, like chemicals left to rot. My throat stung every time I breathed in. Scratches covered the walls. Some shallow, some so deep they carved into the brick. Words, shapes, lines that made no sense. I ran my hand across one and felt the grooves. These weren't from tools. They looked desperate, like someone had clawed at the wall until their nails snapped. In one corner, a patch of brick was stained darker than the rest. I moved the light forward. Metal frames lined one section of the tunnel. Old hospital beds, bolted to the floor. Leather straps still hung from the sides, cracked and stiff. I touched one, and it crumbled in my fingers. Whoever had been here last wasn't meant to leave. The idea settled heavy in my chest. On a shelf sat jars. Thick glass, clouded with age. Inside floated pale shapes, bloated and unrecognizable. Tissue, organs, things I didn't want to name. My stomach turned, and I had to look away. The beam of my light caught labels, illegible handwriting smeared into black streaks. That's when I heard it, breathing. Slow, steady, coming from just behind me. I spun around, the flashlight cutting through empty space. No one was there. I listened. The sound stopped. My heart slammed against my ribs. I forced myself forward, deeper into the tunnels. Every step felt heavier. The darkness didn't just surround me. It pressed in, thick and alive. My light picked up movement now and then, but whenever I focused, nothing was there. Pipes, shadows, silence. Still, I couldn't shake it. I wasn't alone. I could feel it in the back of my neck, the weight of eyes that weren't mine. The air carried it too, a rhythm of breathing that didn't belong to me. I thought about turning back. I even took one step toward the stairs. But something pulled me further. Curiosity, duty, or maybe just the truth that once you start down a path like this, the way out isn't really backward. So I kept going. The tunnel stretched ahead, darker than any night I'd known. With every step, the hospital felt less like a building and more like a living thing. A thing that had noticed me and wasn't planning to let me leave. The tunnel twisted deeper, each turn pulling me farther from anything human. My flashlight's battery ticked lower, the beam thinning at the edges. I told myself I'd stop soon. I lied. Curiosity had turned into something heavier, like a hook in my chest dragging me forward. The floor sloped down until I reached another door, half buried in shadow. This one wasn't rusted shut. It stood open, tilted on its hinges, as if someone wanted me inside. I stepped through, and the smell hit me first: rot, iron, and something electric, like burnt wires. It burned my nose and settled in the back of my throat. My light swept across the chamber. Cells lined the walls. Not rooms, not wards, cells. Each no bigger than a closet, with heavy doors and square holes at eye level. Chains dangled from the walls inside, bolted deep into the stone. My stomach flipped when I saw scratches on the floors, long grooves where something had been dragged. One door rattled faintly, as if something had just let go of it. I checked for tags or records. Nothing. No numbers. No names. These cells didn't exist in any file. They weren't meant to. The air was different here. It felt thick, like the room was holding its breath. Then it vibrated, low at first, almost a hum in the brick. I froze, trying to place it. That's when the voices started. They didn't come from the air. They came from inside my skull. Dozens of whispers at once, overlapping, crowding my head until I couldn't separate them. Words half-formed, sentences broken. Join us. Don't fight. You belong here. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't matter. The voices weren't in the room. They were in me. My knees gave out, and I hit the floor. The flashlight rolled, its beam cutting wild lines across the walls. In that spinning light, I swore I saw faces. Mouths open wide, eyes black and endless, pressed against the stone as if trying to crawl out. I gasped for air, but it felt stolen before it reached me. The voices grew sharper, angrier now. You see the truth. No sickness. Only the door. You're next. That's when I understood. The hospital had never just been about the sick or the broken. It was never only an asylum. The patients weren't being cured here. They were being offered. The chains, the jars, the tunnels, they weren't mistakes of a cruel past. They were rituals. The walls shook, dust falling from the ceiling. I scrambled for the flashlight, clutching it like a weapon. The voices howled at once. Not whispers anymore, but a roar that rattled my teeth, filling every inch of me with pain. In that moment, clarity cut through the noise. The hospital was a doorway. The sick were the keys. And now that I had walked into the ward, the door wanted me. The air pressed in, harder and harder, until I thought my skull would crack. My hands trembled. The recorder in my pocket clicked on by itself. I didn't remember pressing the button, but a voice, not mine, spoke through it. You belong to us now. The recorder clicked off, leaving silence so sharp it hurt. My hand shook as I shoved it back into my pocket. I needed to move, needed something real to anchor me. That's when I saw the desk. It sat in the corner of the ward, half buried under dust and broken glass. My flashlight beam slid across it, catching the edge of leather. A book, thick, bound, its cover warped but still intact. I pulled it free, coughing as dust burst into the air. It was a journal. The first page was brittle, the handwriting cramped and neat. Dr. William Harker, 1941. I read further, the words scratching deeper into my nerves with each line. The patients here weren't described as sick. They were called vessels. Harker wrote that their screams weren't madness, but resonance, the sound of something using them. He hadn't been treating them. He had been holding them, waiting for the right time. My stomach twisted. All the straps, the jars, the cells, they weren't mistakes. They were tools, instruments for keeping something locked in place. One entry stopped me cold. The entity beneath this place cannot be destroyed, only contained. Ritual required. Circle, salt, fire, blood. I failed. Containment weakened. The voices grow stronger. They want release. I flipped the pages faster. More sketches, symbols drawn in shaking ink. Circles, runes, detailed notes about how long the seals would last. The last entry was short. I hear them in my sleep. If I cannot finish, another must. Another must. I dropped the journal, then snatched it back up. My name on the patient file. The voices in my head. The way the recorder had spoken without me. The realization hit me like a blow. This wasn't chance. The voices hadn't just found me. They had chosen me. The air vibrated again, harder this time, shaking the dust from the ceiling. I clutched the journal to my chest, scanning the walls. In the flashlight beam, the scratched lines on the stone shifted. What I thought were random marks now looked like symbols, half-erased circles, broken runes. Pieces of a ritual, unfinished. I pressed my back to the wall, the journal digging into my ribs. My breath came fast. The entity wasn't trapped by accident. It had been sealed here, fed with lives, bound by rituals that barely held. The journal wasn't a diary. It was a manual, a set of instructions written in desperation. And now the seal was failing again. The voices filled me all at once, louder than before, rushing like a tide. You are here for a reason. Finish what was started. I shut my eyes, clutching the journal so hard the leather creaked. My pulse hammered in my ears. I didn't want this. I didn't ask for it. My rational brain screamed to throw the book away, to run. But my hands wouldn't let go. Deep down, I knew I never really had a choice. The truth was simple, and I couldn't deny it anymore. The hospital was a doorway. The doctor had tried to close it and failed. And now it was my turn. I opened the journal again, forcing my hands to stop shaking. The pages fluttered like they wanted to escape me, but I pressed them flat with my palm. The instructions were there, clear and brutal. A ritual, not superstition, not story, but a set of steps meant to hold back something bigger than me, bigger than all of us. Salt, fire, blood. My light swept across the floor. The broken lines carved into the stone weren't random. They were pieces of a circle, smeared and incomplete. Dr. Harker had tried, but he hadn't finished. My stomach dropped as I realized what that meant. If I didn't finish it, no one would. The voices slammed into me at once. Louder than before, no longer whispers. They dragged me into visions, so fast I couldn't resist. I saw my childhood bedroom, the shadow in the corner I was too scared to tell anyone about. I saw every mistake I'd buried, friends I betrayed, lies I told, moments I wanted to forget. Each memory hit like a knife, tearing open wounds I thought had healed. You're nothing, the voices hissed. Weak. A fraud. You can't stop us. I dropped to my knees, gasping. My flashlight clattered away, its beams spinning across the floor. The circle waited, empty and broken. My whole body shook as if gravity itself wanted me to give up. I wanted to quit, to crawl back to the stairs and leave this place to rot. But my fingers brushed the journal, and something steadied me. The doctor had failed, but he'd tried. If he could face this once, so could I. And if I didn't, no one else would ever know the truth until it was too late. I pulled the supplies from my bag. Salt packets, just what I'd grabbed from the diner without thinking. A lighter, and a knife, meant for nothing more serious than cutting tape. My hand shook as I drew it across my palm. Blood welled fast, dripping onto the stone. The reaction was immediate. The walls shook, dust raining down. The air screamed, high and sharp, as if the building itself was alive. The tunnels around me seemed to twist and bend, as though space itself was fighting against what I was doing. I poured the salt, dragging shaky lines across the floor. The voices howled, clawing at me, promising pain, death, worse. My lighter sparked, flames licking at the edges of the circle. Heat washed over me, bright against the cold. The last step was the hardest. My blood smeared across the broken symbol, connecting the circle at last. The chamber erupted. A roar of screams tore through the tunnels, hundreds of voices rising together like a storm. My head felt like it would split open. I screamed back, pressing my hand hard against the stone until the circle closed. Then, silence. It was sudden, absolute. The vibration stopped. The air lightened. The pressure inside my skull slipped away. I collapsed to the floor, chest heaving, my hand still bleeding onto the stone. The journal lay beside me, its last page fluttering as if in relief. For the first time since I entered the hospital, the silence felt real. The ritual was complete. The door was sealed again. The evil was locked away. At least, for now. I don't remember standing up. 1 second I was on the cold stone floor, my blood drying in the circle, the journal pressed against my chest. The next, I was moving, step by step, dragging myself toward the stairwell. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, but somehow they carried me out of the chamber. The tunnels were still. No whispers, no vibrations. The air didn't press against me anymore. It was heavy with dust, but empty of presence. For the first time since I stepped inside, silence was just silence. But that silence felt wrong too, almost too complete, like I had stepped out of a storm into a vacuum. I climbed the stairs in bursts, stopping to lean on the railing when my vision swam. My hand throbbed, the cut still open, leaving smears of red on the metal as I pulled myself upward. Each smear looked like proof that I'd been down there, that I hadn't imagined it. My flashlight flickered, then died completely. I didn't care. The faint gray of dawn bled through cracks in the boarded windows above, guiding me forward. At last I reached the basement door. It groaned open, and cold morning air rushed against my face. I stumbled into the courtyard, gulping it down like water after a drought. The air tasted sharp, alive. I realized then just how long I'd been breathing only dust and dread. The hospital loomed behind me, massive and broken, but quiet now. No hum in the walls, no shifting shadows. Just an abandoned shell. The evil inside was sealed again. I knew it, the same way I knew my own name. But that knowledge didn't make me feel safe. It made me feel watched, as if the silence itself was measuring me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I staggered across the cracked pavement toward the street. My legs gave out, and I dropped to my knees. A voice shouted, then another. Shapes moved in my blurry vision, locals, people from the town. Someone grabbed my arm, hauling me up. Their grip was warm, grounding. "He's bleeding," one said. "Call someone." I shook my head, words scraping out of my throat. "No, I'm fine." It was a lie, but they didn't press. They looked at me like I'd crawled out of a grave. Maybe I had. Their eyes darted to the hospital behind me, and I knew none of them wanted to ask what I'd seen inside. The sky lightened, streaks of pink and orange cutting through the trees. Traverse City was waking up, unaware of what had been clawing beneath it for decades. For the first time in years, maybe longer, the place was safe. The voices were gone. Someone offered to drive me to the clinic. I refused. I just wanted distance, air, the sight of anything that wasn't brick and shadows. I walked instead, slow and crooked, but step by step. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, the hospital looked smaller, just another ruin. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the building remembered me, that it was letting me leave rather than losing me. I stood there in the street, pale, shaking, blood dripping from my hand, but alive. Against all odds, alive. The hospital behind me was silent, and for now, that silence meant peace. But as the sun climbed higher, I couldn't help wondering, peace for whom? Back in Chicago, the newsroom felt too bright, too busy, too normal. Phones rang, printers spat out pages, someone laughed across the room. I sat at my desk with the journal still tucked deep in my bag, hidden under my notes. My editor came by, tapping his watch, reminding me of the deadline. I nodded, pretending everything was fine. I opened a blank document and stared at the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. What could I write? That Traverse City State Hospital was a doorway to something not human? That patients weren't treated but sacrificed? That I had sealed a ritual with my own blood? No one would believe it. Worse, they might believe it too much, and then what? So I wrote what they expected. A travel piece. Nothing unusual, just ruins. I described the red brick, the broken windows, the history of the asylum's closure. I added a line about local legends to keep it colorful, and when I hit send, the relief was sharp, like I'd dropped a weight I couldn't carry anymore. But that night, sleep betrayed me. The moment my eyes closed, I was back in the tunnels. The circle burned, lines of salt glowing white-hot. My blood sizzled where it touched the stone, and in the flames I saw faces, hundreds of them, pressed against the dark, screaming without sound. Their mouths opened wider and wider until the fire swallowed them whole. I woke with my heart racing, the taste of smoke still in my mouth. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and looked in the mirror. My reflection looked back, but lingered. When I turned my head, it didn't move right away. Its eyes stayed locked on mine a second too long, like it was waiting for me to slip. I told myself it was exhaustion, just nerves. But the longer I stared, the more certain I became that whatever I sealed down there hadn't let me go untouched. It had brushed against me, left something behind like ash after a fire. Days passed. The article ran, buried under politics and sports. Readers saw it as a harmless story about an old building. No one asked questions. No one wanted more. And I gave them nothing. But every time my phone buzzed with a new message or someone dropped a folder on my desk, I thought about that journal. I hadn't thrown it away. I couldn't. It sat locked in my drawer, humming in my mind even when I wasn't looking at it. At night the dreams returned, sharper, crueler. The circle, the screams, the doctor's last words bleeding through the pages. If I cannot finish, another must. Sometimes I woke with the smell of salt on my hands. Once I swore I heard scratching in the walls of my apartment, faint and steady, like someone trying to finish what I'd begun. I was still a journalist. I still carried my notebook, my recorder, my camera. But I carried something else now too. A secret no one would ever print. A truth no one could ever see. The hospital was quiet. The town was safe. But me? I wasn't the same. And I never would be again.